Senator Zappone.
I wish to welcome both Minister Shatter and Minister Quinn to the House. The presence of both of you today as we debate this historic bill put forward by Senator Power is deeply appreciated by many throughout Ireland who have advocated change in relation to Section 37 of the Employment Equality Act. And I also want to welcome members of the public who are with us in our gallery, as Senator Power has done, because many of you have been champions of that desired change. Over the years, I've referred to Section 37 as the inequality clause of Ireland's employment equality legislation. And so I wish to commend my colleague, Senator Power, for bringing forward this bill for all of the reasons that she has indicated to us today. By doing so, Senator Power, you have demonstrated not only your political acumen, but also your solidarity with those whose lives have been negatively impacted by the dark shadows of discrimination and unsafety that this section has cast on so many people over the past 14 years who have worked within religious institutions delivering public services. My partner, my spouse, Dr. Anne-Louise Gilligan, was one such individual. She had to face head-on the shadow of discrimination and unsafety the day she decided with me to take the Irish state to court because of its refusal to recognize our Canadian marriage. At the time, she was teaching in St. Patrick's College, Drumcondra, one of the colleges of education that teaches teachers, whose manager of the college is the Archbishop of Dublin. Though her action could be interpreted as undermining the religious ethos of her employment, Dr. Gilligan decided to do it anyway, carrying, though, a heavy threat of financial insecurity, professional loss, and the culture of prejudice that Section 37 imposes on her and thousands of others throughout our land. So, indeed, this section does need change, but today I'm going to suggest that instead of adding further subsections to the Employment Equality Acts, that it is more effective and just to delete the problematic subsection, and that my principle is that no one should be in the shadow of this section on the basis of our identity, and that's the principle I'm putting forward. Let me outline my reasons for this proposal. There are three. Firstly, I think a religious ethos is adequately protected already. As the ministers have both said, it's an important balance to strike between protection of an institution's religious ethos and the rights of an employee to pursue their career without fear and discrimination. Religious ethos is protected by Sections 16, 25, 37(1)A, and 37(2) of the Employment Equality Acts, and by a number of other laws. Section 37(1)A allows an institution to give preference to members of its own faith for a job, a promotion, or for particular duties. Section 37(2) and Section 25 permits all employers to treat people differently where there is a genuine and necessary occupational requirement. All of these sections there are an adequate safeguard to the religious ethos of an institution. Taken together, these provisions reflect the exceptions also which are permitted under EU law. So Section 37(1)B goes beyond that and is, in my view, unjust. My second reason, is Section 37 compliant with EU law? It would appear that we are not currently compliant with EU law in a couple of ways. Firstly, it is not clear if Section 37 permits discrimination based on a person's gender in order to protect the religious ethos of an institution. I say this because Section 37 doesn't apply to the part of the Act, namely Part 3, which contains provisions to protect people against gender discrimination. Thus, Section 37 does not appear to be compliant with the EU Recast Directive 2006, which doesn't allow us to discriminate on the basis of someone's gender for any reason. Secondly, the EU Framework, Recast, and Race Directives prohibit discrimination in relation to sexual orientation, disability, age, and race, in addition to gender. These are categories that refer to people's identities first and foremost, as distinct from their behavior. And I think that's a similar distinction to what Minister Shatter made in his remarks. Section 37(1)B in its current form permits discrimination against people on the basis of their identities. A European Commission report expressly states that Section 37(1), as it stands, is broader than allowed for in the Framework Directive. To discriminate against someone's identity if she is a lesbian, disabled, or older is not reasonable because one's identity is irrelevant to how one performs a job of teaching young people or caring for the sick. And thirdly and finally, who is still not protected by this bill as tabled by Senator Power? Senator Power's bill does not cover everyone affected by this legislation. Even if a person cannot be discriminated against on the basis of their gender to protect religious ethos, although I'm suggesting that's not the case, it's sometimes difficult to predict which ground of discrimination is applicable in some circumstances. For example, a married heterosexual woman or a lesbian woman who becomes pregnant through assisted reproductive technology could be regarded as undermining the religious ethos on the basis of having a disability as opposed to on the basis of her gender. Since this would be a form of disability discrimination, she wouldn't be protected by the proposed bill or by Section 37 as it stands. I think singling out 2 or even 3 or 4 of the 9 equality grounds for particular treatment in the context of this bill could be seen as implying that it is acceptable for an institution to discriminate against an employee on one of the other grounds. For example, a pregnant woman or the partner of a pregnant woman who is covered by the gender ground, a person who is HIV positive who is covered by the disability ground, or a transsexual person who is covered by the gender and disability grounds. And because we don't have a definition of gender identity as yet in Irish legislation, the gender ground under the Equality Acts only covers transsexual people and not transgender people. So I think only a repeal of Section 37.1b can offer full protection to all people. The Irish Congress of Trade Unions, the INTO, the Irish Nurses Organization, and the Equality Authority, some of members of which are present today, all recommend deletion of the Section 37.1b. At this point in Ireland's history, in 21st century Ireland, this section should not be part of our laws.